Welcome to this installment of Open World Chat. I'm John Odom, and I'm joined by Liane Allen.
So today we are interviewing Tim Russ. Some of you know him from his stint on Star Trek Voyager as Tuvok. He's been in a number of other things as well, but that's probably where most of us know him from.
I should hope anybody listening to this particular podcast knows him from Star Trek. My God. If you don't know that he's Tuvok, just click away right now. Find something else to listen to.
No, listen. It's an awesome show. It was a delight to interview. He had lots of great stories and opinions, and it was a lot of fun to work with him.
Sure was. He definitely had his opinions. We brought him on to talk about race in Star Trek, which is honestly both race and gender in the history of the Star Trek franchise are fascinating to me, and I think there's a lot to unpack in those topics.
Yeah. So interestingly, I think Tim came into it with a perspective that neither of us had, as A, viewers, and B, white people. We really didn't see Star Trek and race therein and representation therein in quite the same way as a person who isn't white.
Right. Which is why we had him on, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I know I had a lot of concerns, a lot of thoughts about how people of color were represented, even though the show, obviously, with its progressive bona fides, meant very well. It still came from a sort of very generational and let's be honest, very white place. But, he just told us to chill out.
Yeah. In the best way.
Yeah. I mean, not in so many words, and I don't want to, get ahead of the interview. But yeah, he told us to relax a little about it and really, really spoke highly, not just of Gene Roddenberry's vision, but of how it was implemented.
Yep. It's a fantastic interview. I hope everybody's going to enjoy it.
Well, let's get to it then. Here's part one, actually, because we spoke to Tim for quite a long time, and we're dividing it up into on topic and careening off topic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this, for joining us. I'm gonna start with something, all right, just to butter you up, okay?
All right, okay.
The reason I thought of contacting you originally was I was actually having a conversation at the kitchen table with my family. We were talking about the various new Spocks that are out there, and they're doing a terrific job. And I said, that it was a shame that you essentially were already taken in the Vulcan role, because you do something that, with all due respect to all these other folks who have played Vulcans, I love them to death. I'm a big fanboy. But since you and Nimoy, frankly, are the only ones who wear Vulcan like you're putting on a shirt or something. I mean, I think a lot of actors, you get this with accents sometimes, right? There's some actors who can just, put on the accent like they own it and act right there. And some who have to work at it a little bit, and you can feel they're acting through the accent. Can be a little distancing. But, you just came off like you woke up Vulcan, went to bed Vulcan, and it was so easy. You were right there. And I swear to God, only Nimoy has done that. You could say Mark Leonard, but I looked at the other stuff that he's done, and he was terrific, but he was kind of Mark Leonard. It just was a good fit for him. But no, you're terrific that way. It's just extraordinary.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's coming into the role. What I basically did was just took an amalgam of all of the Vulcans that I had seen, maybe in a couple of movies or on the show, and sort of put them together to give the character a foundation. Because the very first thing you see on the screen when the show starts is that character walking through the door and speaking and doing whatever, and that part of it has to be believable if the character's already been established. If the character was not established, I mean, Leonard Nimoy had to establish this character and put the layers on the character to bring the character to life, from scratch. He was probably given a template, obviously given a description, but he had to bring all the extras into it. And I had to carry the torch. I had to carry the baton. So I've got to get that part right. Mm-hmm. I've got to play that because the people who are watching the show are already familiar with his character. So I've got to come in and at least be as solid as what he was doing, right off the bat. And then the writers can bring in the stories that will flesh the character out over the series. And that's basically how it works.
Well, it was a damn lucky thing that they knew you already had a relationship, I guess, with them from a couple other roles because they hit the jackpot. Yeah, well, and it's also, I mean, it also comes down to the main. Look, if I'd walked in, if I had been, 5'2" and 230 pounds with a Detroit dialect, I wouldn't have played the role. I mean, that's just what it would have come down to. So, I was fortunate enough to not have any, dialect, regional or otherwise, which was, essential to make that character believable because he's an alien. Right.
So, and my parents don't have dialect either. So I wasn't raised around it. And I wasn't raised in the city. I was raised in Air Force bases. So I never had an impression of anybody's dialect from anywhere because I was never in one place more than a couple of years. And I have the height and I have the build for this character. The attitude, there may be some of that in there as well. The friends of mine accuse me of being, not dissimilar from that character as it is anyway. So that probably helped also.
There are worse things that could be said about somebody, right?
Yeah.
Now, one thing that struck me about the character who I love, as far as that a Vulcan entity, that you bring something to the character like a comfort, with the whole concept of just being part of Starfleet. This is who you are. And it's unlike Spock or really any of the other Vulcan characters where they seem to be aware of their, almost being a foreigner in the Starfleet world, but you don't seem to bring that to your character.
Yeah, no, I think the whole concept of Starfleet being what it is, humans and aliens, working together. And that's what the whole concept of the thing has been from day one, is that, as Roddenberry's demonstrated, that's what, our world is. We have multicultural, interactions and things with business and with, other aspects of our lives, every day in most places, especially the big cities. And that's just the way things are going to be even farther into the future. And, obviously he does the same thing. So the aspect of being quote unquote foreign or being different outside, it doesn't, in the Star Trek world, it doesn't matter. And that's what the appeal is to the show in the first place. The people who are devoted fans, look to the future as being something where people are not judged by their look, their ethnicity, their, cultural identity. They're not judged by any of those things. And it's just another person working together side by side on a project or on a mission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love the way you really brought that into your role. That was great.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously there's he's going to have a difference of opinion as far as how gregarious he might be or the people around him might be, as it were. He might comment on that from time to time, but, that's the nature of that character. I mean, that's what makes the whole entire, crew, the cast makes it more interesting and more dynamic. If you don't have some of those, colors going on in there of my, let's say a very, muted lack of tolerance for, the more gregarious and human-like qualities around me. So,
Well, it's great that you brought up Roddenberry because that's a perfect segue. Of course, we're hoping you'd come on and help us do a little analysis of race in Star Trek historically. And it's obviously a multi-generational franchise, and the generations come with their own cultures and their own baggage. And, I look back at the original series, and Star Trek gets a lot of credit. And I say this as a massive fanboy, for its progressive vision. Famously, when Nichelle Nichols was talking about leaving, Martin Luther King asked her to stay because that representation was important. On the other hand, you had, she's a very small role, and her, there were signs that they might want to really fill out her character, but then she got relegated to the background a lot. And so I almost wonder if maybe the original Star Trek gets a little too much credit for that, because it did have contemporaries. You had Mission Impossible, you had I Spy that actually featured primary characters,
right?
Who were characters of color and were more fully realized. You ever get a sense that maybe Star Trek gets a little more kudos than it deserved?
No, I don't think I don't think so. I think that given that time, the reason MLK mentioned to her about that was at that time you did not see African American characters on hardly any shows to begin with at all, much less in a role that portrayed them as in a status position like an officer on the bridge. That was an officer on the bridge of a ship, and you just didn't see it. You didn't see it anywhere. And the reason he said that to her was because of the fact that those roles were rare and hardly ever seen at all. So her being there as an officer on the bridge, the point is that she's an officer on the bridge of a ship. So let's take the ship and make it a battleship on the high seas. Same thing. That was non-existent back at that time. And so for her to be portrayed on television as that character, that starts to get into the psyche and the subconscious of the people who are watching it. She's just as much an officer, which is not an ensign or a cadet. She's an officer. So she is a member of rank on the bridge. And that's important, albeit her job being a communications officer. She's a communications officer. That's what they have on regular ships. And, there's a bosunman. There's somebody going to steer the ship. Somebody's going to do this. Somebody's going to do that. If they're all the radar operators, whatever, they can be officers. And that's the point. It's the fact she's an officer on the bridge. That's what's important. Not whether she has major scenes every episode or not. That's just not the way it works. I mean, Sulu didn't have huge scenes every episode. The only people that had the biggest ones were the primary key characters. So be it. But those other officers on the bridge, it was Sulu, or it was Chekhov, or it was Uhura, they all had status. Mm-hmm. And hers in particular. So it was important that image be portrayed at that point in time when it simply did not exist. As an example right now, you can turn your television on and watch commercials that show interracial couples. I did not grow up with that, and neither did you.
Right.
Interracial couples on commercials, a lot of them. Okay. Not just one or two. There's a bunch. That was never on before. You never saw it. You never saw it in movies. You never saw it in TV shows. Did not exist. They would not put that on because the majority of the country just, for selling products, they didn't feel is going to turn them off. They want to sell it to everybody. Now it's changing. Now you see them all over the place. And that is going to creep into the psyche of the people watching it as being normal. Nothing unusual. Nothing to see here. And the younger people growing up are going to see it. Nothing to see here. So there won't be that kind of thing. That is changing. I'm sure to the consternation of some people in this country, but that's the way it works.
Yes.
And that's, even though the very first case, the actual case of that was in the 60s, late 60s with the Loving case, that was brought to national attention. The point is that they still never showed that kind of thing on television and film. And now they do. So her being on the bridge, definitely a mark forward, definitely a big deal. You could count on one hand the number of shows that had key African American players in it, that there were series projects. So yeah, just her being there was a big deal at that time.
Yeah, you actually mentioning the generational thing. We earlier had been talking about kind of the sci-fi world and the representation of women in there. And I've got kids who are now in their 20s, and they have grown up with that world. And so for them, it's completely normal. You know, it's not a controversy to go to a movie where there's a female character who's the lead in a sci-fi movie. Mm-hmm. And I love thinking of the fact that the next generation is going to come up and it's not going to be a thing. That there are people who have different skin colors in different roles, and great. You know, I love
exactly. So it makes a huge difference what people see, because that's the medium. Mm-hmm. I mean, we change. You know, as soon as an actress on a big show wears a certain hairstyle, or the first lady wears a certain hairstyle, all of a sudden you start seeing the same hairstyles everywhere. You know, a rap star does something and everybody's, you know, doing the same thing. It's that thing is so pervasive. It's so infectious, because it's our, you know, it shows what the current pop culture is and whatever it might be. And people want to emulate that. That's what it does. I mean, whether, you know, there's life imitating art or art imitating life, man. It's, you can't tell the difference. It goes both ways, you know, and when it works in both directions. So, yeah, it makes a huge difference. Yeah.
Well, you're in a unique sort of place to see that happening and you know, in the whole process of Star Trek specifically, but then obviously, you know, the rest of the world, because of your role. You know, there was, in the primarily white fan base, there was a lot of talk, I remember, about the Black Vulcan, which now in retrospect, you know, I don't think anybody thinks twice about in that fan base. But, you know, that must have been an interesting experience, because that makes you uniquely transitional in the exact process you were talking about.
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's here again, you know, Roddenberry's goal was to break barriers. And he never stopped after Nichelle. You know, he never stopped after having an Asian American on the bridge at the same time she was there. That was unheard of. He never saw it. So, and so his goal was to break barriers in every one of these series he did. And after he passed away, his predecessors did the same thing. The concept stayed the same. And, you know, how insanely logical is that? I mean, obviously in the future, it takes place 3 centuries in the future. And how much have we transitioned in the last 60 years? How far have we come in 60 years? Mm-hmm. And how far would we come in 360 years? Come on, give me a break. So obviously, those things are not going to be the same as they are today. You know, even though there are things that are different today. There are women flying fighter jets off of aircraft carriers. Hello? Okay. You wouldn't have had that if you didn't have the transitions, if you didn't have the opening and the consciousness and awareness of things socially and politically, and also through the television, as it were, to bring these things out, the stories that again get people to see things differently. And, you know, somebody who's a Trek, you know, devotee, you know, it's an oxymoron for them to come up and say, you know, how can there be a Black Vulcan? I said, do you watch your own show? You know, are you aware of the concept of the show that you so emphatically, you know, support and are rabidly a fan of? Infinite diversity and infinite combinations is actually what Spock would say. Infinite diversity and infinite combinations. What does that mean? Hello? Vulcan has 2 suns, not 1. So what's the temperature? What's the temperature like on the equator of that planet? Come on. Oh, and by the way, does everybody on Earth look the same? Duh. You know, I mean, if people just think about 2.5 minutes off their nose, you know, before they, you know, react to things, but just put it together with some kind of, you know, nuts and bolts, you could figure that out. Why not? Why wouldn't there be someone who looks different on the planet the same way that evolution has changed the way we look on this planet? Rocket science, man. You know.
Right.
They need to, I don't know what they're teaching in schools, but they need to ramp it up another notch as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, yeah.
Think. Get it together, man. Put it together.
Well, and I think another part of, you know, that you were, I don't know, I want to say specifically transitional, but you were the beginning of a sort of another wave. I always, you know, felt watching this, and it's obviously all from outside here. I've got my own little, white experience here. But that Star Trek had a tendency to be somewhat reductivist, maybe even more in Next Generation than the original, interestingly, with essentially some of their analogs for race, like Klingons. They're an entire planet, as you're talking about, all kinds of, it's going to be different cultures, different types, but they're all kind of cookie cutter. And if that isn't, a little bit suggestive of maybe some of the attitudes that were kind of built in. I mean, the future looks like a very white place under Gene Roddenberry. And, was there a conversation that had to go on, among these developing creators? Did Star Trek need to outlive Gene Roddenberry? And that's a touchy question.
That's, I know that when Voyager took off, our concept was in unexplored space. So we had a whole slew of alien characters coming through through the portals, as it were. I mean, our stories involved all kinds of cultures and people. And in fact, and none of them looked the same. They were all quite different. There was diversity up the wazoo. And in fact, one of the stories had to do with branding people in the way that they look, by making it look as if they were the ones who were the aggressors, when it turns out that the people who looked like human beings were in fact the aggressors. We did that twist. It's a classic Roddenberry type twist in a story where Chakotay's character has amnesia, and he's rescued by this group of humans in this town or village, and they, bring him into the fold as a rebel, an underground fighting group against these evil alien creatures who are marauding and violent and, all kinds of problems for them. And of course, the aliens look like they're horrific looking. I mean, they look like the Predator. And so we're watching the show thinking, yeah, those guys got to be the bad guys. Well, it turns out the bad guys are the humans, the ones that are marauding and the ones that are plaguing, the ones that are, raiding and really giving the other side a hard time are the humans. It's the humans that are doing it. The other guys are the ones that are trying to defend themselves. This is what, Gene stood out to be. This is the perceptions issue of in this case is alien races, but it's a personification of the human race as well. We demonize other cultures on this planet just simply because they don't believe in the same thing we believe in, or because they look different. And that's been the case since day one. We're going through it now in this country here. We have complete polarization. We have complete and utter polarization. We're actually going through what we already went through in the 1960s all over again. I mean, what did we learn? We haven't learned anything. It's so ingrained. And all of that is just a matter of perception. Pure and simple. And I think that on Voyager in particular, we introduced a lot of alien cultures. We introduced a ton of them, on our series because we could. And there were a lot of stories in which we just misinterpreted what they were doing or what they were all about, or the episode Innocence with the young children who were left on this planet alone and they're supposed to die and whatever. And we think, oh my God, what a horrible race of people to do that to their children. Well, the children were getting older. They would get younger. They would look younger as they got older. So they would age in reverse. But they're actually very, very, they're elderly, but they look like little kids. Mm-hmm. Well, we don't find that out until later because you don't understand. You are putting your perceptions onto someone else and you don't see how that works. You don't understand how this culture works and that culture works. There's several episodes, even in the other series, there were some good episodes that dealt with, like Toss, for example, the character who's running, being chased by another individual from his planet, being chased like a rabbit. It's a hunt. And our folks on the ship are trying to understand why, he wants to be He doesn't want a safe haven. He wants to keep running. He has to keep running. He has to be chased. And they just can't understand why he doesn't want to, take their protection from being chased. And it turns out that's what his culture is all about. His culture was about being the rabbit. And the other culture was about the chase. And the longer the chase went, the more status he gets in his society and amongst his people. He becomes a hero if he can stretch that chase out to a certain length. Like the longer, the better. So he has to run, and the other one has to chase, and the other one fails at their duty if the chase ends by somebody else holding him while he catches him. That's not a capture. That's not a chase. That's nothing. So both sides fail if they're not able to do what they're supposed to do. We can't understand. That doesn't make any sense to us. That's what Roddenberry kept doing over and over and over is shaking the perceptions of these races and assuming that because you look like a certain way that you're going to be a certain way when you're not. And the fact that you're doing certain things that don't make sense, you have to figure it out and then realize, oh, that's what it is. Oh, well, I see now. So yeah, we had a lot of different cultures, and I think that even opened up the concept of our interaction with races and different cultures more so than the other shows did, because we had unexplored space, which was great for us. Story wise, we can go on for days. I loved it.
Yeah, this is why I'm on the this constant argument, not argument, but just sort of friendly banter with a friend of mine who is, Team Deep Space Nine, and I'm Team Voyager. So,
It becomes more of a, the concept is important. Your foundation is important, and it's not just Star Trek, but you see all the billboards for episodic. When you do an episodic series, you're trying to stretch this concept out over, years. And in order to do that, you have to have a really solid foundation. You got to have a really solid base in order to give you the stories that you want. If the base is not that solid, now you're going to have to start stretching things to make it work. You're going to have to start expanding things to give you an option. That's why they put the wormhole next to the space station, because you have to have, you need an influx of storylines and people coming through and issues to deal with and whatever it might be. You can't do that without having, a foundation. Our foundation in the original series foundation was unexplored space. That's the very first thing that the opening says. You're exploring. You're discovering new phenomenon, you're discovering new cultures and races, and thus you have stories. You are going to have any kind of stories you want in that regard. The only other solid foundation for a series in that sense is if you have what's called a serial, where you have two lead characters who are encountering and investigating different stories every episode. Like X-Files. X-Files has a huge, ginormous base for story. You can go on forever with that stuff because every story is basically different except for the lead characters. They take you through the next story, but you're not locked into what they did last week. Deep Space Nine, you got the same characters in and out all the time, so it becomes more of a soap opera than it does, something else. We, on the other hand, in Voyager and the original series, are moving through space. So whatever we left behind last week or 2 weeks ago, that's gone. Right. So the next thing we see has got to be something new. And that's the nature of that thing. So your foundation for storytelling is expanded, light years, as it were, than having to be stuck into, what some of the shows I'm watching now on Amazon or Netflix. I'm looking at them going, yeah, they're going to have to fill that 45 minutes with something because that you're going to beat that concept it'll be dead in the first 3 days. You can't keep playing the same note over and over again. So how are you going to make that into a 2 or 3 season series? And it comes out to nuts and bolts. The only reason that they do to make a series is because they want to make more money. And that's what that jumps down to, really. That's the business of show business, as it were. Not great, because if you're the viewer, you're bored, but they just don't want to make a movie. I'm about movies. I like movies because you get in and you get out. You tell the story
Right.
and then you're done. You're not trying to tell the story every single week. That's what happens. So your concept for a show got to be solid. Otherwise, you've got nothing. So,
Yeah, it's the reason why so many series, by the second or third season, it feels like everybody is phoning it in. It's like, oh, I have to do a show again.
yeah, and or the story is just you just filler, or they meander. What is it? They meander. They have to go off the trail. To create an episode, they have to go off the trail to do a two-parter. And it's like all of a sudden people scratch and they go, wait a minute, where'd that come from?
Right.
I've seen it, as you're watching, what is it? The story, the Under the Dome, which is Stephen King. I read the book. It's like 1,000 pages. And literally, if you want to do a series, you could do a limited series on that because it's 1,000 pages, man. And that thing, it's got wonderful stuff in it that all makes sense and that all tracks because of the circumstances. You don't have to make up anything. It's right there. But I watched the series and I'm looking at it. Oh my God, what are they doing? That thing is meandering all over the place and change the characters around and introduce people that came out of nowhere. I said, what are you doing? Just follow the book, for God's sakes. It's a good story.
Right.
That story, because you have that big, huge foundation and the whole thing tracks. It tracks logically. It tracks in terms of story. You don't have to change it. And you can follow and fill up a good, you can do a good season and a half, 2 seasons on that book alone and you just make it a limited series. But you could do that on that book and not have to put any filler in it at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You might cut some stuff out and make it a little shorter, make a 1 season, a limited series, 9 episodes, 10 episodes, and just wail on that thing. They just killed it, just destroyed it. So, I have to deal with on my end of the business, sometimes the people who just don't think things through, man. I don't know what they're doing. They just don't think things through, for some reason. I don't know what it is. I don't understand it, but I know that their business is to keep making episodes. Just make everything more episodes. They don't want to do a movie because a movie takes so much time and effort and money to make. And then it comes out. It takes a year or 2 to finish it and get it released and whatever. And that's it. Whereas if they do everything, put that investment into a series, they can stretch out that thing and make more money. And
keep using the sets, keep using it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. That's what it comes down to. So,
Gotta know when to quit when you're ahead, right?
Would be nice. It would be great.
Just getting back to Deep Space Nine there a little bit, the other team, right?
Yeah.
It seems like that, they were in a way they didn't even do with Geordi in The Next Generation. They put themselves out there getting Cisco. It's like, we're going to put up or shut up here. This isn't an analog or a metaphor for race anymore. Now we have got a black human in charge, and he's got this relationship with his son. Right. How'd they do? Did that work? I think that, I thought it worked out well. For Deep Space Nine, I didn't watch a lot of Deep Space Nine, so I can't be an authority on any of that. I didn't watch that show that much. I saw maybe 1 or 2 episodes here and there that I caught just on the fly. I wasn't I wasn't following that series when it was on. We were working right across the alley from them. We were shooting at the same time they were on. I was actually on 2 other episodes as the character, so. Which was kind of cool. I did like that. I like the mirror universe thing. I love that. That's fascinating. But I did not follow the show that much. I think Avery Brooks probably had a huge hand in that whole conception in the first place. That sounds like Avery. I want to portray a father and son relationship on a show that's in a positive light. That's something that's positive, and I'm sure that's Brooks 100%. I guarantee you it's him. I don't even know for a fact, but I'll bet it is. Because he wanted to portray, again, he wants to make a social statement, and demonstrate this relationship between father and son. And that's important. Whatever that relationship comes out to be, it's still a relationship. He wants to have that on the show. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it goes. Like I said, that show needed, that's another branch of that series because of the nature of the show and the platform of the series. So it can become more of a soap opera than anything else, if you will. We'll see you back in 2 weeks when the interview goes a little nuts. Thanks to Chris Piatek for our theme music.